It feels incredible.
Hello and welcome to this awards edition of FOF Live presented by La Pop. As always, you can check out La Pop in their Doral location, Instagram or Twitter. As you can see, we have a smaller group here tonight, but it will still be as good, still be as rowdy. A lot of topics to discuss. We're going to get into the man right behind me, Skip Schumacher, winning Manager of the Year. We're going to discuss the Cy Young Award announcements that just happened a few minutes ago. We have Ken Barral. We have Eli Sussman. How are you guys feeling for this episode?
Pretty good. Lots to talk about. So
I'm a little under the weather. I have a stuffy nose as winter sets in up north. Yeah, and I'm trucking through it. I can't say that for everybody. We have some other staff members who are one of them is a little sick. The other one is complaining about his knee a little bit. We have some wimps on the staff, even though I love them very much and trust them. It's not the most durable team that we have here, unfortunately.
Well, lots of IL moves you had to make for today. But let's go ahead and talk about the awards that just happened. You can watch them right now at MLB Network. The Cy Young Award announcements. We'll start off with the NL. Both winners. We have two-time winner now, Blake Snell, and we have Garrett Cole getting his first Cy Young Award, which is a little surprising looking at the caliber of seasons Garrett Cole has had in his career. I believe now it's the sixth Cy Young Award for the Yankees. And we'll start with Blake Snell in the NL. Eli, Blake Snell, his second time winning Cy Young Award. Different leagues, did in 2018 with the Rays, now doing it with the Padres. And this is the guy who, after that 2018 season, have had maybe up and down career seasons trying to replicate what he did in 2018. It all came together again now in 2023. What would you make of his season so far, his 2023 season? After joined by Savento.
Yeah, it was an interesting one by him. I think you'd have to say it was even more successful than his previous Cy Young win, but it came with the caveat that he was walking everybody. I know that our pal Luis Adeoyes, that drives him crazy. There's nothing more that he hates than guys that don't go deep into games and that fill up the bases with walks. So it's not sustainable for him, and it comes at a fascinating time because he's a pending free agent now. So it is really hard to gauge exactly what sort of contract that he's going to get coming off of this. It is expected to come from a team other than the Padres because the Padres are dealing with some financial restrictions and now the really tragic death of their owner, Peter Seidler, as well. But it's just that this was a year where in the NL the competition just wasn't there. So he had a good season, all things considered, from a run prevention standpoint. And coincidentally, when Gary Sanchez, of all people, stumbled into the Padres' lap and they started working together exclusively for a big chunk of the season, that's when his season really took off, right in the middle there, when they were paired together. The numbers during that middle few months of the season were pretty stunning between Snell and Gary Sanchez as a battery. So to me, unfortunately, I felt like on the NL side, it was kind of just about a lack of alternatives out there. All the other guys, the ones that actually made it deep into games and pitched a ton of innings, those in terms of run prevention, those guys didn't hold up. I think a lot of people in the back of their minds were thinking that Spencer Strider at some point would really take off. And even though he piled up the strikeouts, he wasn't able to bring over his home run suppression from the previous year as well. So his ERA was really bloated and he wasn't even a finalist for this one. Yeah, really down year for Cy Young candidates. the National League as a whole really missed having Sandy in there to kind of bring up everybody else.
Yeah, we're joined by Savento. Savento, anything you want to add about Blake Snell winning the NL Cy Young Award, and maybe any alternatives you would have had? I know maybe Luzardo definitely should have been there. Maybe Brian Holling.
Yeah. This was basically what we could hope Edward Cabrera's final form would be in like a perfect world. So I support Snell winning with the high walk rate, low inning count, but good ERA. It was a weird year. You had a lot of guys like Steele, Gallen. They just kind of faded towards the end of the year. Logan Webb, he was pretty consistent and pretty good all year, but I guess his ERA was just a little too high. And then Zach Wheeler, had a strong year, but at the end of the day, there just weren't any of those like 2 ERA guys outside of Snell, and usually that's going to get you the Cy Young as long as you hit a certain inning limit or threshold.
Yeah. Kevin, anything you want to mention on this NL Cy Young race now that we're looking at the entire list here? Snell getting 28 of the votes. Are there any guys there maybe who didn't get any first place votes that you're looking at? Maybe a Zach Wheeler, like Savento mentioned. Maybe Kodai, who was a finalist for Rookie of the Year.
No, it looks. I'm very surprised Justin Steele wasn't a little higher on this list. I know he kind of gave it away, essentially lost the Cy Young possibility at least towards the end of the season. He had some pretty bad blow up starts, but still, I'm surprised Spencer Strider didn't get at least one first place vote. But aside from that, Blake Snell won this pretty comfortably and pretty dominantly, honestly. And I think it was made very clear that the National League was not very good with pitching this year. There were not many, that guy. There weren't many Sandy Alcantara's in the Cy Young race this year. Logan Webb, I was pretty surprised he finished in the top 3. I know Justin Steele wasn't very good towards the end, but at least he deserved to be in that top 3. But aside from that, Blake Snell deserved it. I know Lewis wasn't very happy with the walk rate, but got to give it to this guy. And he now wins the second Cy Young and probably is going to cash out pretty well in free agency.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and shift a little bit to the AL with Garrett Cole. But before we do that, looking at the NL WAR for pitchers, there are 2 Marlins in the top 8, 6 and 8. Can you guys guess who? It's fairly simple.
Braxton Garrett, Jesus Luzardo.
There we go. Luzardo with a 4.1, Braxton Garrett with a 3.8. So maybe Luzardo should have at least gotten a vote there when you're looking at least in that bottom half. But here in the other league, the AL, it was just a dominant. There was no other person that could have gotten that first place Cy Young award, and no other than Garrett Cole getting his first ever Cy Young award, which we mentioned before the stream, which is a little surprising looking at the caliber of seasons he's had with Pittsburgh, Houston. Eli, what's the difference between the AL and the NL in terms of the nominees, the finalists for the Cy Young Awards?
Yeah, honestly, it was kind of the same situation reflected in the unanimous voting, where there was a pretty big separation from the top guy and the rest of the field. In terms of Garrett Cole, it wasn't totally on his run prevention, but it was the combination of having the workload, having the strikeouts, and maybe in the back of some voters' minds, they had the sexy win-loss record in there as well. With him, it is pretty surprising that he hadn't won a Cy Young until right now, because he, of course, received the largest pitcher contract ever, like a few years ago when he came over to the Yankees. And he's been pretty good for them like that entire run. But this is where some of the things, it wasn't even necessarily his best season of his career, but it was also kind of that story of other guys kind of falling off a little bit or having some inconsistency in there. So, yeah, he was the best of this entire group. And I think the narrative was on his side that he was like one of the only good Yankees this year, in a year where so many of their players were either underperforming or out with injuries. I think that narrative about him like being one of the few guys that was truly living up to expectations on that star-studded roster maybe helped him a little bit. Shout out to Pablo Lopez for making it on here, finishing 7th in the voting. Pablo had almost as many strikeouts as Garrett Cole did this year. That was a transformation that I didn't see coming, with him coming up with a sweeper, and after years of just not having a usable breaking ball, to put together a more complete pitch mix and to have these type of results to back it up. Yeah, overall, just across baseball, it wasn't a sexy year for starting pitchers outside of the obvious winners in both leagues.
Chris Martin made the voting too. That's pretty
Three
funny.
war for a reliever.
And Felix Bautista too, so good for him. Former Marlins DSL prospect, I think it's what it was.
There was another former Marlin there on that list, Kevin. I don't know if you could see it. I don't know technically Marlin. I mean, I was looking at his stats. I guess he kind of maybe earned it, but I didn't really know him getting, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know, Eli. You can brine me a little bit on that, and maybe with Castillo, I thought Pablo maybe performed better than Castillo, and you have other guys also probably maybe put George Kirby maybe in front of Castillo. Did he really have that dominant year in Seattle?
Well, in terms of what was working against Pablo, sometimes voters are adverse to having two guys on the same team too high up on their ballots. And so maybe Sonny Gray kind of ate away at some of the support that Pablo would have received in a vacuum. That's kind of my best explanation for why he didn't finish a little bit higher.
Yeah, and most of these guys here will get paid. Sonny Gray, another guy I believe is going to free agency, will get paid. Maybe future Marlin, who knows? But let's go ahead and talk about the other award that happened last night. The man right behind me, Skip Schumacher, winning Manager of the Year, the fourth Marlins manager to win the award. Kevin, can you name the other three? Quick Marlins Jeopardy.
Girardi, McKeon, and Donnie.
All right, there we go. Okay.
Come on, bro.
I didn't give you the year. That would have been.
I think I probably could have gotten it too.
But again, Skip, such a fantastic job he did with the Fish this year, getting them to the playoffs. Savento, Skip winning the award. Just tell us a little bit your reaction when you heard the news and maybe the expectations this sets for the team now.
Yeah, I was refreshing my feed frivolously looking for the Rule 5 protection updates as Skip was being announced. So for me, it almost took second priority, throughout the night. But, there was no other option for Manager of the Year. I mean, when you look at the expected Pythag win percentage for the Marlins versus what they actually ended up doing, they overperformed probably the most by any team in baseball. And when you do that, usually it points to the manager getting rewarded for that. Hopefully we don't, the trend of the NL Manager of the Year is not having a job 2 years later. Hopefully we don't fall into that trend like the other ones. But, I think with Skip at the helm, the Marlins are in a pretty good spot. And I would say the fact that Peter Bendix flew out to California just after being at the GM meetings, I would say would bode well for hopefully their relationship and their intention on having a long-term relationship.
Yeah, and with this award here, Kevin, what do you think this also does next year, maybe for Skip and his staff? We're seeing now Brent Brown getting interviewed for a bigger position with the Seattle Mariners. John Jay is being considered for a managerial role, openings, getting interviews. What do you think this does to maybe the coaching staff next season? Do you believe we'll have an entirely new coaching staff, maybe aside from Skip and Mel?
No, I think you're overreacting a little bit there. Skip, we'll see what happens. Remember, he's kind of managing here on a 1-year deal to essentially, unless his club option gets accepted for 2025. So if obviously he's built a culture, he's got at least put in the roots of that culture, and Peter Bendix is just going to add on to it, hopefully with what he wants to do. But should be a fun year for Skip. He obviously deserves the extension more than anybody right now, and hopefully maybe during the season he'll get it, maybe towards the end of the season after his club option is accepted. But yeah, he had a phenomenal year with the Marlins. Obviously, from going from 69 wins to 84, making the playoffs is something that not really many managers have done. So shout out to Skip. And not only has he been great with the players, he's great with the media. You could attest to that, Danny, Isaac, and everyone. He's been great. We hope to have him on the podcast very soon. We've been
You
in
can bring the
contact.
award on the show.
Hopefully we could have him on very soon. But yeah, he's great. He's great with the media. And I was watching an interview from him when he first got, and he's like, I want to, something that's going to be weird is talking to the media every day. He's definitely very good at doing it. So I'll give him that. He knows how to. He goes into detail on every question. He gives you a very good explanation for everything. So yeah, he deserves it very much. I would have been stunned if someone like Brian Snicker would have won, because I'm pretty sure any of us could have managed that Braves team to 110 wins. So, yeah, shout out to Skip. And it's nice to see that his staff is getting consideration for other jobs in sports, to be honest. Obviously, Brent Brown, I'm surprised he wasn't given more interviews to begin with. I know the offense was the worst to get into the playoffs, but still, I mean, going from with a marker that you were before in 2022 to 2023 is definitely impressive. So, we'll see what happens if he gets that job in Seattle, which I guess essentially is a promotion for him, still in some type of hitting coach role. But I guess now it's called offensive coordinator, I think is what we're talking about. But yeah, John Jay's getting consideration for that Mets job, and it's nice to see that more guys on the Marlins are getting that consideration. Hopefully, not many of them leave though.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Eli.
For the moment, nobody on the 2023 staff has left for a different opportunity. This is the one that seems to be the closest, with Brent Brown interviewing with the Mariners. The Mariners themselves, a team that was pretty competitive last year, but their shortcomings mostly came offensively. And Brant was somebody, obviously, along with most of these other coaches, he was a newcomer to the organization. This past year was his first one with the Marlins. And by many players' accounts, he dramatically changed the way that they game planned against their opponents. Just the advanced scouting that he incorporated into his personalized game plans for hitters in order for them to know what kind of pitch types they were looking at, what the tendencies of those opposing pitchers were, and like more importantly, to knowing his own hitters, to say that this is what you do when they throw a pitch like this. This is the type of thing. This is your best chance of having success against a pitcher with this arm slot and this sequencing. That level of detail is awesome. It works well for some players. As Kevin mentioned, as the stats pointed out, the team as a whole just was not good offensively, despite these best practices going into play. It didn't actually translate to a whole lot of runs. You could just see it in some individual cases with this team, of guys having big bounce back years or career years, and in several cases attributing that to Brent Brown. If they are able to keep him, I feel ideally you still want to keep him around and feel that there's stuff to build off of in a second year with the organization. Somebody that, just like Skip, he's very good at communicating with people. He even more so than Skip, he's a very even keel guy as well, and a good communicator. So that would be it'd be a tough loss if they do end up losing him. For the moment, nobody has left the organization, but I also caution that when the coaching staff is actually set, there's going to be an announcement about it, and there's not been any sort of announcement about what that coaching staff is going to look like. So that just tells you that there is still some things to be determined. When you look around the league and you just see that a lot of recently hired new managers have to fill out their staff, the only surprise here is that it comes with the Mariners. The Mariners being a team that already has had a long-serving manager in Scott Service. There's a lot of positions out there with the Mets, with the Angels, now with the Cubs, a bunch of organizations out there that just switched up their manager and have to fill out the staff underneath them. The only surprise is that Brant is being lured potentially by a team that already had some stability on their coaching staff.
And apparently Stephen Vogt was one of, the working in the bullpen in Seattle. And when he left, one of their assistant hitting coaches moved over to the bullpen. So they had a hole in their hitting coach group because they have two hitting coaches, and that's where the interest comes from. One thing with Brand is even if you didn't read about how intense he was with his preparation and how communicative he was, if you just watched the games, I mean, you would see consistently during pitching changes, you would see Brant kind of in the on deck circle with whoever is about to hit. It seemed like often it was Jazz or Bell or Berger. He was always kind of with them, prepping them for the next pitcher. And as a Marlins fan, it's something I'd never seen, an intensity that I had never seen from a Marlins coach.
Yeah, and this is something worth noting. If you were to leave, it would be the third hitting coach Miami would have one new hitting coach for the past 3 years. So there you go. As Saventa was mentioning, there you have Brent Brown with Soler. He did this with every hitter at every either pitching change or any possible moment he could. And everyone loves what Brent Brown has been doing. But yeah, it would be the third hitting coach in 3 years for this Marlins team. So you go from Marcus Thames to I'm missing the middle one there after him, and then Brent Brown. So yeah. Or unless I'm wrong.
No, I think Tim's was 2022. And
who was in 2021 then?
Rosen was 21, right?
No, Rosen was the bench coach.
He was the bench coach and offensive coordinator.
Oh, let's see.
All right, well, I'm missing 2021. Oh, was it Eric Duncan? Whatever his name was.
I feel like he was an assistant when he was here, an assistant hitting coach.
I know Duncan wasn't. I'll look for it.
Yeah, Eric Duncan was the hitting coach. Robert Rodriguez, assistant hitting coach.
Okay, yeah. Because I remember in 2020 that Eric Duncan got a lot of attention for the Marlins' success. You could call it. So yeah.
Keith Johnson, all those guys there.
Yeah, so it would be Duncan, Timms, Brent Brown, and then they would have so possibly a fourth hitting coach in 3 years. Oof. 4 years.
Well, I wanted to see if you guys, this question from Sean about Brant being like less of a fit because of Bendix and how he runs his analytically based operations. And, is that maybe a fair question to ask if Brown is a fit because of Bendix?
Well, who's the guy? I'm pretty sure the Dodgers, either GM or president of baseball ops, was from Tampa before. So he comes from that circle, and Brown was there for a couple of years, obviously under the GM or president of baseball ops. I'm forgetting the name now, but
that's Andrew Friedman.
Andrew Fried, there you go. So he was under Brown. So I don't think there will be any issue there. Obviously, you would think that they would adjust, strategically with a new guy, and you'd bring in the players you want for that type of position. So yeah, I don't think Brown is less of a fit by any means, unless Bendix wants to make a move there, and he would overrule Skip in this case, I think, with the staff.
And Brown himself did seem pretty analytically driven. Ultimately, the data is going to come from the front office down to what Rod Barajas, was he the quality coordinator or the that kind of middleman of the data and the players, and ultimately, they're going to implement that plan. These coaches don't seem like those old school, like, what was it, Mike Shid, the Cardinals.
Mike Shields, yeah.
Yeah, who got fired pretty much because he was kind of in his own way. It doesn't seem like any of these guys are really too stubborn in that regard.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you guys, now that Skip getting this award, now I'm going to knock on wood. Do you guys think maybe now it looks like other teams might try to poach Skip now, seeing what he did with the Marlins at all? I'm not saying wanting it to happen or it might, but does this open maybe in the next year or two that other teams might try to get Skip Schumacher as their manager?
They can't.
Or in the future.
If they were to decline Skip's club option, then obviously it's a different story. Yeah. But they can't, because you're going in a lateral move. You're going from manager to manager, and they can't do that. So I don't see a chance of that happening. Honestly, I think there's the chances of him getting extended are higher than him leaving Miami, and he's not leaving Miami anytime soon.
Right. I think one thing that the Craig Counsell fiasco has brought to the forefront is the idea of good managers declining extensions in order to get to free agency, and actually showing their worth on the free agent market as managers in a way that we're not really used to seeing. That's looking ahead though quite a bit, because that would be in mind that they pick up his club option, and that's still 2 years away. Talking about that as a possibility of somebody, even if they're successful in one place, going to go to the open market just to see what other teams would be willing to offer them. Because by most reports, Skip is one of the more underpaid managers in baseball right now. And that was, I think, undoubtedly a factor in why they made the transition from Mattingly to Skip, is because Mattingly was on a higher salary level at that time due to his experience, due to the salary that was originally set by Jeffrey Loria. So that is ideally that shouldn't be a factor. All things considered, what you're paying coaches is just a very tiny fraction of what you pay for your major league players overall, and that shouldn't get in the way of you bringing in the best man for the job. But managing this job title as a whole has been in an interesting position across baseball in recent years, where people are trying to understand how much the manager actually does in this day and age versus how much the front office mandates them to do. It is I'll just finish this by saying that the only negative for Skip here is that it's going to be difficult for him to win the award next year as well. It's very unusual for guys to repeat. I looked up the history. Kevin Cash recently went back-to-back years in the AL, but aside from him, you have to go back almost 2 decades to Bobby Cox. When Bobby Cox was with the Braves.
Team he won it with. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's yeah. Do you want to get into what's this, the flip fish with our special trivia, I should say?
Yeah, in honor of Skip winning Manager of the Year, as we go to our mid-show break, I wanted to pick a former Marlins player who went on to become a major league manager. So there are not a ton of options to choose from. I think this is going to be a relatively easy one that we have here. A former Marlins player that went on to become major league manager. So here is what we got. There are his career stats as a player and his positions that he played. At this point, 50 years old. He, remember, used to be a Marlins player and went on to become a major league manager.
Current manager, or just could be?
If I tell you, I think that would make it a little too easy. It could be. I'm going to leave it open.
Oh, okay. I get it. I know who it is. Do I say it or after the break?
After the break.
Okay. There, yeah. 50. Yeah.
Okay, so think on that for a little bit longer. In the chat, if you get it, put it in as well. Former Marlins player went on to become a major league manager. There are his player details. And when we come back from the other side, we'll do the big reveal on it. Stick with us.
Is it
I know who it
Mr.
is.
Aaron Boone?
Yeah.
There we go.
Mike Redmond came to mind, but obviously he was a catcher, and Boone was
2007 with the Marlins.
yeah.
Hey, the looks at last season, he might have not been a manager anymore with the Yankees, but we'll see how he does this year. This is definitely a make or break for Aaron Boone.
Yeah. They're not off to a very good start this offseason with Mr. Brian Cashman's comments.
Do you like the hire of Rowson as their hitting coach?
That's interesting. Yeah, he could be fine. It wasn't all that long ago that he coached the Twins to a record-setting year when he was leading that offense. He said all the right things when the Marlins hired him. That was one of the more disappointing, but one of the few times in recent history where I had pretty high expectations for a coach coming in, and yet it didn't translate quite what we thought he would. But he was a nice guy, and because he was the bench coach, remember in 2021, there was a period where Donnie had COVID, and there was an extended stretch where Rowson was the acting manager. We got to hear a lot from him, and as far as I can tell, he's a good guy that you'd root to have some success moving forward. So it's good that he got this kind of opportunity, and now he'll be highly scrutinized in a big market where they absolutely need to improve. So I wish him the best of luck.
Yeah. Didn't they not win a game when he was
wasn't
manager?
Marcus Thames their hitting coach? I don't know if it was last year or the year before. So they're just recycling old Marlins.
2022. Yeah, 2022. Didn't Rowson not win a single game when he was the acting manager for the Marlins?
it was a bad stretch. I think he won some games, but it was a very poor winning percentage.
Kevin?
Yeah, from what I
I
remember,
was reminding myself that because I was like, he didn't win a game.
it was rough. It was during that second half of that 2021 season where they had a really awful offense. Oh, I think they were awful on both sides of the ball, actually, to be honest, both hitting and pitching during that period of time. So yeah, he had a tough hand that he was dealt with right there.
Did Thames just get hired as a hitting coach somewhere, I believe?
No.
Tim's, yeah, he went to
Oh, Chicago. Yeah.
the White
Right?
Sox. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez, man, he goes to like these really bad teams.
He knows someone. He keeps getting he's getting offers every year. But let's go ahead and talk about the Rule 5. The reason I'm guessing everyone wants to be here for. Savento is itching at the bit to talk about Troy Johnston. Kevin is all in for Anthony Maldonado. But let's go ahead and talk about who they did protect. We'll get to Troy. Everyone wants to get to that. We'll get to Troy. Let's talk about Victor Mesa Jr. and Anthony Maldonado. Kevin and I have a Big Fish Small Pod coming out tomorrow, which you can listen to just 10 minutes long, just really quickly going over it. Here we have a little bit of a long-form discussion. Kevin, talk to me about Victor Jr.'s younger brother.
Yeah, so Victor Mesa Jr. obviously gets protected. You could have gone either way here. It's probably safer enough to protect him in this case. You never know if a rebuilding team that, could just have Victor Mesa Jr. on their roster, hide him, a team like the Rockies could have easily taken him. But yeah, definitely worth the 40-man spot. He had a very nice season with Double A for the most part. Definitely fell back down to earth after a very nice start, but it's for the most home runs of his career high in RBIs as well. Definitely, for the most part, obviously, I think this has been very well documented that the Marlins farm system lacks depth at center field. So having someone like Victor Mesa Jr., who is a natural center fielder but could also play the corners pretty well, is important. And maybe he could be a big leaguer at some point towards the end of 2024, maybe in 2025. So yeah, definitely worth that 40-man spot and gives you some speed. He was pretty close to a 2020 season, funny enough. So yeah, he performed well for Double A.
Yeah. Eli, on Victor Mesa Jr., what are his long-term prospects? I know Kevin mentioned 24, 25, but is that a guy that could potentially be an everyday player for the Marlins, or is he seemingly just maybe a fourth outfield will be maybe his ceiling?
I think he has everyday upside. I like him a lot. And I thought he was better than the numbers suggested this year, especially because he is significantly younger than the competition he was playing against. His center field defense stood out to me quite a bit this year. That looked more legit this season than I had been expecting and anticipating based on seeing him at previous levels, all things considered. And as you can see, his raw power, the number of homers that he hit to straightaway center this year, this was not an anomaly right here. It's pretty enticing. So I think there's still some general concerns about the overall hit tool in there. He's not quite as lightning fast as Jazz, for example, in center field. So there's going to be some limitations on his range if he's put in that position. Most likely, you'd want to slot him into a corner spot in the future as well. Yeah, the question here to me, I think the only reason why I was a little not fully convinced that he was going to be selected is because he has no AAA experience, and because, as Kevin mentioned, the best results that he had came generally early in the year. So he's somebody that very likely would have struggled in the big leagues if he started off next season in the big leagues, even if it was with a bad team. So for that reason, that had me a little bit skeptical. But I think Savento is a little lower on Victor Jr. than I am. Tell us where you stand with him.
I'm not low on Victor. I think, like you said, everyday regular and center field ceiling was hitting the crap out of the ball in spring training. I think he hit like 108 or 9 mile an hour foul ball off Christian Javier that just went foul. And so, he's got great power, very good defense. I just didn't think there was a chance in the world that a team was going to select him in the major league portion of the Rule 5 draft, just because I just don't see a team keeping him on their major league roster for the majority of the year. Perhaps maybe defensive replacement late game speed option. But that was really the reason I was kind of assuming he wouldn't get protected. I'd like to see him start back in Double-A because he's been young for every level he's played in. So, he signed and he debuted as a 17-year-old, so he's been younger every single year he's played than the competition. I'd like to see him start in Double-A, get to a good start, kind of start to dominate that competition, and then hopefully get up to Triple-A and maybe get a cameo at the end of the year if things go poorly at the major league level. But I like Victor Mesa. I think his floor could be a fourth outfielder with regular upside. And he's a personality, great personality for Miami.
Going on from VMJ, Savento, Anthony Maldonado. Well, what do you like about him and maybe his role now with the Marlins, where seemingly it looks like he'll definitely be on the roster coming opening day, more than likely?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely nasty. He had a stretch of innings this year that were just incredibly dominant. Probably the most dominant stretch of innings that a minor leaguer could possibly have. His stuff is nasty. The high velocity fastball, the nasty slider, probably one of the best sliders in minor leagues as well. I'm looking for him to break out in the bullpen to start the year. The Marlins need a right hand high leverage reliever as they kind of get Anthony Bender back into the mold. And so I'm looking for him to solidify a spot in the bullpen, and hopefully we see a Nardi-like emergence from him. And just the idea of him and Nardi leading the back of a bullpen at a very low cost and controllable number of years is incredibly exciting for me, and I'm just looking forward to it.
He also has a lot of velo, high velo for a guy like Maldonado. It's impressive, and I'm very surprised that he wasn't on the major league team last season. To be honest with you, he definitely could have been a nice piece to that team, especially late into the year when you had David Robertson struggling, AJ Puck was struggling. You could have brought in someone like Maldonado to at least leverage it a little bit, but hey, he has a good chance to crack that major league roster now come opening day. So very excited. I love the fastball slider combo. And he's a strikeout machine. There's no other way to put it. A little bit of higher walk rate, but that's fine for the most part. And strikeout machine. That's what stands out. Very low ERA. FIP is still high. It's higher than the ERA, but still a 3 FIP is pretty damn good for the most part. So a lot to like from Maldonado. And I know he dealt with some injury this season, but I mean, when he was on the field, he was nasty.
Yeah, if you just trim out the first couple weeks of his season, it gets even crazier right there. ERA in the low ones, a slugging percentage of like 200 as well. Man. I have immense confidence in him against right-handed batters for sure. I think the question is whether he's going to be similarly effective against that overall become ultimately a high leverage guy that the Marlins could really use. But one way or another, it's a really good find for somebody that was a day 3 draft pick. He fell all the way to the 11th round back in 2019. That's a really good find. When we've been talking about reflecting on the DJ Svihlik draft era and pointing out the high profile misses that he had at the top, you got to give him credit for some of the finds that he's gotten deeper down in the draft, and Maldonado being one of them that fell all the way to the 11th round. And he is, one of you mentioned Nardi as kind of Nardi being in a similar situation where Nardi was that same draft class and he fell all the way to day 3, put up great numbers in the minors. It took a little bit of an adjustment for him to realize his usual self at the big league level, but we saw that manifest this past year as well. So shout out to DJ Svihlik for at least finding some gems in the later rounds that have pretty significant value, either to the major league team or maybe down the road as trade chips. It's been a good run for him, even with a few injuries in between.
I'll give that to DJ and the Marlins development system. If there's one thing they've been able to pretty much solidify for themselves, is not only starting pitching, but relievers as well. Nardi, obviously Alex Vesey isn't with the team anymore, but he's a major leaguer. Kyle Hurt made it to the big leagues for the Dodgers as well. And now most likely Anthony Maldonado makes it. And I know it's another case, but Brian Hoeing got up to the big leagues as well. He spent some time there. Simpson, Sean Reynolds both made it to the big leagues. They didn't pitch, unfortunately, but they were in that locker room. Robert Garcia, I guess. I'm pretty sure he's not a draft pick, but they
Josh
developed him
Hartley?
for a very long time. No. But yeah, a lot of success with relievers, and it's going to continue. They drafted some pretty good guys this season, I think, for a reliever. So yeah, should be interesting. And I think we should highlight Troy now.
Oh,
And DJ also drafted Alex Vesia in the 17th round in 2018. So that's back-to-back years of, Vesia in 2018, Troy Johnston in 2019, back-to-back 17th round picks. An impressive, late round resume. And
now we could probably spend the next 20 minutes just on this, and we probably will. We probably will with our list of people in the stream here tonight. Kevin, I'm gonna let you kick it off. I'm not even gonna say. I'm just gonna say Troy Johnston not protected. Go off.
Yeah, I think it was a horrible decision to not protect Troy, and I'm not going to go out here in full rant mode like Alex Carver did with Gene Segura, but yeah, this was not the right move for them to leave Troy Johnston out there. He will no longer be with the organization following the Rule 5 draft. He will 100% be taken. I see it as a lock. Despite this Rule 5 draft usually being reliever heavy, it's hard to pass up on a guy who had a 2020 season, was the Miami Marlins minor league player of the year, and on top of that, hit over 300 at a 399 on base percentage between AA and AAA. You can make the case that he was a little old for AA, but when he went to AAA, he was just as good. This guy hit for a lot of power. You could talk about the lack of defensive versatility there. He could really just play you first base. Could try it out at left field. He did it during the start of his major league career, but really, I don't see a reason why this guy wasn't protected, because he would have made the major league roster in my eyes come opening day. I don't know if Peter Bendix, I don't know how much he had to make with the decision. We all know Brian Chadden was the interim GM, and Peter Bendix has been relying on those three GMs. But yeah, this was a bad mistake by the Marlins. I do think Johnson will get selected, and man, he was just so good for this team. Not only did he improve just on all facets of the game, but he had a 2020 season. He stole 20 bases, and this guy lost weight. He said he didn't lose power, and evidently it was true. He had 26 home runs, and yeah, just horrible decision to leave this guy unprotected.
And it is ultimately a question of which team is willing to make that gamble on him. It is pretty rare for somebody to hit as well as somebody does over the course of a full-length season the way that he did, and at the highest minor league level, and just be unprotected the following year. Yeah, I was very surprised by this one, considering that the flexibility they have on the 40-man right now. It's hard to believe that he wouldn't have any trade value at this stage, just considering the really extensive track record that he has of good minor league production. I know that I think Savento could probably pull them up. Some of the measurables on him aren't the greatest. I don't think his max exit velo or even his 90th percentile are quite on the same level as even Victor Jr. as well. And so when you factor that, and also the lack of defensive value, and ultimately the age as well, that there's really not any room for projection here. There are faults in his game. At some point, the results should take precedent over that. And also the kind of message that it sends to other players in the organization, that you do everything right, especially this past offseason, recognizing that he still had some deficiencies in his game, and specifically addressing those to make him a more complete player. You get rewarded with the Minor League Player of the Year award, and then to get just no respect whatsoever from your organization following that, and to have them take this position where they're essentially willing to give you away for a very small fee to whatever team is interested. I think that kind of troubles me as well, is the message that it sends and the kind of precedent that sets for the other players that are coming up after him.
And it needs to be noted that Troy was drafted by the Marlins. He was developed in this farm system all the way from the bottom all the way to AAA. I just find it really weird that the one guy this team was able to develop from the start to finish is the one they're most likely now going to lose. And hey, good for Troy. He's going to be a big leaguer, most likely. So wishing him the best. And I'm very excited to see what he does with whatever big league team. I know the Padres showed interest in him last year in the Rule 5. Evidently, they didn't take him, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Padres take him this time around and keep him on the big league roster, give it a shot, see how it goes. And I know their intentions were, if they were to take him, keep him on the roster for a little bit, see if it worked, they would have kept him, and if not, he would have been returned back. But, definitely had a better year than 2022. So maybe this time he gets to stay on the big league roster if he were to be drafted for a full season.
Yeah. You mentioned the Padres. I was gone for a second, but are there any other teams that you guys believe he could potentially draft him? I know Kevin mentioned the Rockies a good amount.
I'm pretty sure this was Alex Carvin, and I know he mentioned it somewhere before, but I know he had mentioned the Guardians. They now have Kyle Manzardo, so I don't think the Guardians would draft someone like Troy, but the Angels need a first baseman, I think, unless I'm blanking out on a name. But for now,
yeah. Angels have Nolan Shanuel.
No.
Oh, yeah, right.
Come on, Kevin.
My FAU boy. Yeah.
Come on.
Whoops. I don't know. Then the Pirates?
The Pirates will always be a team. I probably always looking. Probably just one of the.
Hey, all 30 major league teams have the chance to draft Troy. If they need a first baseman, you have it there. And obviously, he could still work with the major league staff, which would be great for him. So we wish him the best.
Maybe
I hope he doesn't get drafted, but at the same time, I hope he does. Obviously, you would like to see him finally reach the big leagues.
Yeah, right. Maybe if the A's trade Ryan Noda, Troy Johnston might.
Yeah, just going through the teams in reverse order, because the Rule 5 order is pretty similar to the reverse standings that they use for the MLB draft. It is interesting that a lot of those teams at the top are somewhat crowded at first base and DH. When it comes to the Oakland A's, the Kansas City Royals this past season, they had some uncertainty there, but that's only because Vinny Pasquantino got hurt. And I think in a vacuum, they'll certainly prefer Vinny over Troy, given what he did as a major leaguer before he got hurt. Even with the White Sox, they have Andrew Vaughn. That's his natural position. And Vaughn he's a decent big leaguer at this point. Once you get probably to the Washington Nationals, that is probably the first spot where you can see if I think they just DFA'd Dominic Smith, or they're in the process of non-tendering him. So that is the Nats are. Well, they have also Joey Meneses as a guy that could play first base when he's not DHing. So I don't think Troy's going to go number one overall. I think it's a little bit overstated that when you look around the league, MLB Pipeline pointed it out that compared to his historical norms, a pretty low percentage of top prospects got protected this year. I do want to just say that maybe there is a possibility that we're overrating the appeal that he has to other teams. We've seen this in the past where it does seem from the outside, it seems like a pretty obvious mistake. And yet there have been some cases where other teams just don't perceive value of these players quite the way that we think that they do. So I'm going to just hold back a tiny bit on the idea of it being a certainty that he's gone. But I think it is very likely. And I'm kind of with you, Kevin, that I think you have to root for him to go somewhere else if this organization is not going to value what he's doing. If he's better appreciated somewhere else, it'd be nice to see him get rewarded that way.
Yeah. And another question from Sean. This probably more towards maybe who does Marlins have a chance at getting anyone? I don't know what pick they have in the Rule 5, but are there any names that weren't protected, that maybe shocked some people, maybe other Troy Johnston-esque players on other teams?
I can't think of a name right now, but all in all, I do think the Marlins would go with a reliever if they were to make their selection. Now, it's worth noting that you don't have to make a selection in the Rule 5 draft. You could easily just skip your pick, but I do think, knowing the Marlins' history, and for the most part, they've been pretty successful in the Rule 5. I do think they would go with a reliever in this case, and I would be a little shocked if they were to go position player, unless there's a catcher they really like, but I don't think so.
I didn't see any position players that I thought would have been worth selecting. There were some intriguing players, but just none that seemed like they could be rostered for the entire year. You'd bring them into the system, but they couldn't stay on the major league team. So you'd have to return them. But there was a pitcher that the Red Sox left unprotected. His name is Shane Drohan, I believe. He he was a starter. He kind of excelled his way up through the minors and really broke out, I think, in Double-A. A little bit older, maybe like 24, 25. But he had a lot of success in Double-A, was kind of a prospect riser. And then when he got up to Triple-A, it slowed down a little bit for him, but he was still a pretty effective pitcher overall. I could see him going, the Marlins at this point would be drafting like 19th or 20th. But he is someone that I could see them pouncing on as just starting pitching depth, maybe a swingman, maybe a long reliever. But that was someone that caught my eye that wasn't protected, especially considering I have him on my dynasty roster in my fantasy baseball league. So I could see him maybe being a selection.
All right.
Yeah. So with everything there and with Troy, let's say he does not get selected. Let's say no team wants Troy. They all pass on Troy. What is his outlook as a Marlin? Does he even get on the field in 2024? Do they just ultimately try to trade him? What is the outlook for Troy if he's not selected?
He'll get a big league invite and he'll try to make the roster, I guess. So that's all I can think of. And if he doesn't, he'll start back at AAA, and it's another new year for Troy Johnston with the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp.
Yeah. They have Josh Bell. He exercises player option. He's around for another year. But I don't think Bell is going to be Marlin beyond 2024. There's a chance he doesn't make it through the year if the team is pretty terrible and they like to cash in at the deadline on a pending free agent. If they don't feel that they can sign him long term, then you have this in-house option who would be extremely cheap and controllable for a bunch of years moving forward. That's kind of the main reason why I'm confused about the decision, because Troy's really next in line at the first base position for this organization moving forward. And both before Peter Bendix, and I think especially with him, they recognize the value of having cost-controlled young position players to plug in to these positions rather than competing to retain veteran free agents such as a Josh Bell. Nothing against Josh Bell, just an understanding that the Marlins are going to have to spend a lot of money at other positions. The resources that they have, they'll have to use some of those at the up the middle positions, where, as we're speaking right now, we have no idea who their catcher is moving forward. We have no idea who their shortstop is moving forward. We think maybe Jazz is the center fielder moving forward, but they don't have great answers at all those positions that are that it's extremely difficult to find efficient solutions at those spots. Let me just save resources for that. First base is a spot where you generally see small market teams rotate through a cast of short-term deals and free agency, or more like ideally to just develop their own hitter, that somebody like a Troy Johnson to plug in there and ride with him until he gets expensive as well. To me, like, worst case scenario, he comes up and you use a minor league option on him. When you put him on the 40-man roster, you have 3 minor league option years to use. As frustrating as that would be, there should be a pretty big void opening up in 2025, no matter how this upcoming season goes, that he would presumably slide right into. And if it's not him, then who is it going to be? Is it going to be Jacob Berry? We were not highly encouraged by the year that Jacob Berry has had. Is it going to be Zach Zubia? He's put up good numbers, but that's more
Shout out Zach Zubia.
Yeah, he's more of a platoon guy at best. Moving forward, is it going to be Torrin Montgomery? I know Kevin is very high on Montgomery, but he most recently made up to high A. Could it be Paul McIntosh if they don't buy into his catcher defense to slide him over to first base? Maybe. But
hey, Jordan Groshans could play first.
What's up with Carlos LeBlanc?
It feels like Troy is the it feels like Troy is the best option of those. So at this particular moment in time, I don't know why they would risk losing him, taking all that into consideration.
Yeah.
Hey, as Aram said, this is the state of the farm when your minor league hitter of the year doesn't even get protected, and you're okay if a team does snatch him up. Ultimately, there's a chance he doesn't get picked. It's rare for a hitter to get picked, and while Ryan Noda did go last year, maybe Troy, he slips through and he's kind of the backup option for the backup first base position. I thought he was going to be. I penciled him in as the backup first baseman. At the end of the day, they have a lot of crap on the 40-man roster, just non-productive players. Avi Garcia, Peyton Burdick right now. Jordan Groshans, Sixto Sanchez. Jacob Amaya's got stuff to prove. So they have a lot of guys on the 40 who aren't going to be contributing to the team. And maybe they just did not want to risk the potential of Troy being another one of those, 4A guys that we've just become used to, where they, mash in the minor leagues, then they come up and they just are duds. They strike out too much. They don't make contact. So, maybe the underlying data kind of led them in that direction, but maybe they have other plans. I guess we'll see.
All right. Anything else you guys want to talk about? We can end things early. I was thinking doing a little prediction time. I do have a question I want to ask everyone. I know, Eli, if we get the prediction up, I want to ask a yes or no question to everybody.
Oh boy.
I still need to make the new video. So
Oh.
Kim's run as GM has been over for several weeks, but I guess she still has one more appearance here with us.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
So for this prediction time, I wanted to do all about the man we just talked about, Troy Johnston. And for this prediction time, it is a yes or no question. And maybe yes, you can say the team that maybe he will go to. Maybe I'll give you a little extra points. But does Troy Johnston get drafted in the Rule 5 draft? That'll be our prediction time question. And starting us off, as always, Kevin.
We'll get drafted. I believe he will be a Padre.
Ooh. Okay. Savento.
No. Too many guys with no 40 spots for him to be picked.
Eli.
I'll say he gets drafted. That I mentioned it before. The Washington Nationals. I think they'll come calling for Troy Johnston's name and take him number 5 overall in the Rule 5. So he'll stay within the division. Whether he sticks with that team throughout the course of the season, that's more up for debate. But I think Troy gets his shot with another organization.
I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Troy Johnston does get selected. I'm going to go ahead and say the Oakland Athletics, either they trade away Ryan Noda or Troy Johnston is the backup the entire year. Going him to the Athletics might make him a top 10 player already in the organization. But I'm going to go ahead and say yes, Troy Johnston does get drafted.
Hey, if Noda gets traded, that's the guy the Marlins should be all over.
Yeah.
Maybe he gets traded to the Marlins and opens up a spot to Troy. Maybe this is all pre-planned. It's all pre-planned.
I think somewhere in our writer dashboard, we have an article from Kevin about Ryan Noda as like a trade candidate from.
It was a very long time ago.
Oh, Kevin!
Yeah.
I had that article since I believe before the deadline, so I'll take a look at it.
All right,
yeah,
that's
freshen it up. I'll just point out here that Friday we have the non-tender deadline coming up. The Marlins almost certainly will be doing something, if not multiple things, in terms of not just non-tendering players such as Jacob Stallings, but perhaps not limited to Jacob Stallings. I mean, it's a time where you see a lot of other trades around baseball. And at the moment, we just saw the 40-man roster, 3 open spots at least, and that's before the potential non-tender decisions. They could be a home for other teams that have more of a roster jam than they do in order to start filling this thing out. We're getting a little deeper into this offseason, and as I touched on, there's still some pretty big gaping holes. So maybe they start to chip away by picking up some guys that are some other veteran players that are being squeezed out of other teams.
all right. That's going to do it here for us. For myself, Daniel, Kevin, Eli, Savento. This is FOF Live presented by La Pop. As always, go Fish. Go Troy. We love you.